We're just having a little technical difficulty right before we begin. Are you ready? We want to welcome everyone out to our Highland City Council meeting on Tuesday, March 18th, 2025. It is 7:13 p.m. We'd like to welcome once again everyone here. We'll start our meeting with an invocation by Councilmember Ron Campbell, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance by Councilmember Doug Courtney.
Our dear Father in heaven, we are grateful, Father, for the opportunity we have to assemble together in behalf of our city. We're grateful to live in this country, in this beautiful area of this country, and we're grateful for the residents of Highlands that are participating in this meeting. We ask that thy Spirit would be with us in a spirit of cooperation and understanding and listening. We ask for safety for those that are traveling in this weather, that they will travel safely. We pray for this in the name of our Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
At this time, we have time for what's called unscheduled public appearances. We'd like to invite anyone to come up that would like to address the council on any topic. If you'll please state your name and keep your comments to 3 minutes, please.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kevin Pace. Honorable Mayor, esteemed council, and dedicated staff, it's good to be able to come and address you today. This is mostly extemporaneous. When I read the minutes of our last city council meeting, I was really impressed and grateful for the more holistic discussion of traffic and safety concerns here in our community. I live at 9626 North, 6530 West, right off from 9600 North, but my grandchildren play on 6510 West, 9600 North. The traffic screams by there, literally. And we hear them going, some have been cited for 60 mile an hour plus on that 25 mile an hour street. I want to thank you for this time today, and I want to talk about the safety concerns on 9600 North, and I'm going to read much of this because generally I'm dressed a little more appropriately and I'm more prepared, but I didn't have that time nor that ability today. Clearly something needs to be done on Canal Boulevard and 6630 West. I applaud Director Trustee's recommendations that are included in the notes. That is a dangerous intersection. A tree needs to be removed. Lines of sight have to be improved there. I use that intersection. It is truly dangerous. Canal Boulevard, as a reminder, was engineered and built to carry traffic at 40 miles per hour. It was intended to be a major collector. It doesn't mean that it should be, nor do we want it to be, but that's the way it was built and constructed. 9600 North was always intended and was built to be a minor residential connector. Canal Boulevard has built-in traffic calming measures, the most significant of which is where it narrows down to Mitchell Hollow. That is a superb traffic calming measures. If one is going too fast and misses that, they're going to realize that really, really quickly when they hit that curb. I support all traffic calming measures, be them striping, be them speed tables, speed bumps. I don't think Highland should exclude any possibility there. Here are the demographics. These are my counts, and the city can verify them. These are homes whose primary driveway enter and exit on 9600 North and Canal Boulevard. From the Alpine Highway to 6,000 West on 9600 North, we have 32 homes. These are residences with people who live in them, whose driveway enters and exit on 9600 North. We have one speed limit sign on that stretch of road. Canal Boulevard has 0 homes, 2 electronic speed signs. From 6,000 West to 6,800 West, 9600 North has 39 homes and 2 churches and 1 speed limit sign, 1 manual sign. Canal Boulevard has 7 homes by my count, 5 of which are in that last section.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Time goes by so fast. And 4 speed limit signs, including 2 electronic ones. 9600
Which
North.
were the ones that had the 2 and the four speed limits? What was the last road? Canal?
Yeah, Canal Boulevard.
I just want to make sure.
From 6,000 West to 6,800 West, it has 4 speed limit signs, one of which is electronic, going from east to west. Coming back west to east, it has another electronic speed limit sign. So that's 3 electronic speed limit signs on Canal Boulevard, none on 9600 North. And there are only 3, actually, it's only 2 stops, only 2 speed limit signs on 9600 North, one between the Alpine Highway and 6,000, one from 6,000 to 6,800. And the city gratefully put in one of those detectors at the bottom of Mitchell Hollow. I think it did it today. I'm not sure, today or yesterday, but it wasn't turned on, so people couldn't see how fast they were going. 9600 North does not have sidewalks to its length, yet we have children who walk and play. They go to Legacy grade school as well as they have junior high. We have a traffic guard at 6,000, gratefully, and other places to help them. And Canal Boulevard also has children that have to cross in that far western section where it's called Madison Avenue, and that comes back to that same intersection at 6630 West. We believe, and I'm speaking collectively, although I'm here representing myself because I haven't had time to go get any signatures, that 9600 North should be on the top of the city's priority list for traffic safety. I hope it doesn't take a child darting out into the street to have this be recognized. 25 miles an hour doesn't seem fast, and I admitted that it doesn't seem fast until that basketball or that ball rolls out into the street with a young child following it. My grandchildren cannot play in the front of their house. We have to lock them in the backyard because of the danger there on 9600 North. Twice I have been told by law enforcement, and I mentioned this to the mayor and some of you beforehand, that they've been instructed only to cite on 9600 North people that are exceeding the speed limit by 15 miles per hour. That was twice independently. And I was stunned, and I said, can we at least give warnings? And they said yes, and I said, so if we go on over here to this residential street that, just home after home and a quarter lot roads that drop off into other collectors, you would let somebody go 40 miles an hour? And the response was, of course, no. It kind of depends on the nature of the street and sort of how things are. And that's a practical response to allow speeding on a 25-mile-an-hour road. But I don't know how many cars on 9600 North or on Canal Boulevard are Highland residents going from place to place, and how many are residents from other cities that are going from their city through our community as a matter of convenience to get to shopping in Lehigh and American Fork, where American Fork and Lehigh get the real economic benefit of that, and we get the traffic, the pollution, the noise, and the danger. So I'm here to thank the City Council for your attention to this matter, but I'm continuing to urge you to be more holistic in your perspective on road safety in Highland and consider all of our roads where our residences have homes and children playing in them and next to them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ken.
Hey, Kevin, can you email us your notes with those numbers?
Can I correct my spelling?
No. No.
I'll be happy to.
Kevin led me, you were on a transportation committee several years ago to help the city with some determination, correct?
I was, yes.
That's a little bit why I thought he had some good input on that. So that's a little bit why he said, hey, let's have you continue so we can get some better input. So thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who'd like to come up and address the council on a topic? Okay, seeing none, we'll now close our unscheduled public appearances. We actually have a couple of presentations tonight. We're going to start with our first presentation, which is a legislative update from our Utah House of Representative, Kristen Chevier. We are grateful to have Kristen here. This is her first year serving, and so we're excited to hear from Kristen. So we'll turn some time to you, Kristen.
Thank you. So I'm Kristen Chevrier. I am honored to serve.
I'm sorry, I said your name.
You said it. Chevrier. Yes, you said it incorrectly, but that's okay. You're not the first, and I'm sure you won't be the last. So I'm honored to be able to serve you as your state house rep, and I'm happy to be here tonight. And I'm just going to give a little bit of a report on what happened during the legislative session. And then after I just make some comments, you're welcome to ask questions. So during the legislative session, we decreased taxes with $127 million in total reductions. Oh, I wanted to give you each one of these so that you can look at it too. Shall I just start it down here? Okay, so $127 million in total reductions, including a reduced income tax rate to 4.5%. We expanded the child tax credit for children 0 to 5 years old. We eliminated the income tax on Social Security for households earning up to $90,000. And we increased fairness and transparency for property taxes with the HB 110 combined basic tax rate reduction. Our state has a healthy rainy day fund. Thank you. We made some cuts. We ran a very tight appropriation ship. We stayed inside our budget as we are constitutionally bound to do. And of course, we encourage all governments on all levels to do the same thing. So we also facilitated homeownership, increased education spending, bolstered community and school safety, increased energy production capacity, worked to improve transportation, and created a plan to meet current and future water needs. And the corresponding bills for each of those things are on this sheet that I've handed you. As I mentioned at the Utah County Central Committee meeting the other day, sometimes the bills we kill are more important in the long run than the bills we pass. Two of the bills that we killed were SB 337, which I think most of you are familiar with. It's the Land Use and Development Amendments. There was and continues to be good intent behind that bill, and I greatly value the sponsor and his contributions and his hard work on the bill. But I felt, as many of you also felt, that the bill was an overreach into the operations of cities and counties, and that the best government is closest to the people, and that your voices, as our local government, are important and should be heard, and that you should have a seat at the table. So I advocated against that bill, and I know I saw the mayor up there. I assume that was the bill he was there for. And that bill ended up not moving forward. HB, and that was a combination of strong opposition, both in the legislature and in the public. That is not to say that the bill will not move forward at some future time, or that pieces of the bill won't move forward. So vigilance is appropriate. HB 454, which the mayor mentioned earlier, that's the local government fees modifications. This is a transportation fee bill that some of you reached out to me on during the session. There was a lot of discussion around the bill. The bill had an exemption for charitable organizations so that they did not have to pay the transportation fees that everyone else pays. That exemption was removed before the bill passed in the House, and it was replaced in the Senate. And then the bill came back to the House for concurrence, but the sponsor circled the bill because she knew it wasn't going to pass with that in it. So the bill did not advance. So that bill may be something that will come up again in the future. but I know that the sponsor is well aware that that exemption is a problem. So I think that will be considered in the future as well. HB 468, this is the bill that got away. It was one of my 4 bills that I ran. It's the ALPR, the automatic license plate reader bill. And it was developed in collaboration with dozens of stakeholders, including the Department of Transportation, Flock and Motorola, the Utah Law Enforcement Legislative Committee, the Utah Privacy Commission, the Utah Office of Data Privacy, and a lot of help from the Chief Privacy Officer and Libertas. So we had the full range of law enforcement and privacy people involved in that bill. The bill passed in committee unanimously. It passed on the House floor with 2 no votes, and the Senate committee was also unanimous, and then it just never made it to the Senate floor. So huge disappointment for me, but we'll be bringing it back. The bill, what it does is it provides some safety rails around the use of ALPR data, and we reached a consensus between law enforcement and the privacy people on where those rails should be, where we should be doing some additional study, and how we can move forward to protect privacy rights and civil rights and also public safety. So I think the bill was really a good one. We just need to get it back up there and try again. So there are a few other bills I was asked to address. One was SB 188, the school district modifications. I think some of you know far more about that than I do, but the bill, it was the 4th substitute. It has been signed, and it will take effect immediately. Most of the concerns were addressed in the 4th substitute. I did talk to some community members from our House district and beyond our House district about the bill before it was substituted multiple times, and I think most of their concerns were addressed with the substitutions. An additional year of employee protections was added in the last substitution. Interlocals can enter into loans with new districts. Bond proceeds will be divided proportionally. There are still some concerns about future splits because we're in the middle of doing the census. So there is concern that we're going to find out in 5 years that we need to do another split, but that's a battle for another day. So Utah is an open enrollment state, and that will be maintained. Excuse me. District boundaries were announced this week. I don't know if you all saw that. The Central District includes Lehigh, American Fork, Highlands, Cedar Hills, Alpine, and Draper. So that encompasses our House district and beyond. I was a little surprised that we included Lehigh with ours, but I don't know. I had seen really early projections about what might happen, and I didn't know that was where it was going. What's that?
That was heavily negotiated.
Yes, I'm certain of that.
And it was a result of using the Kempsey Gardner Institute population numbers rather than the 2020 census numbers. That's why
Are you talking how the districts, the different houses, like the voting districts got put together, or are you talking about that Lehigh came with us with the
That Lehigh came with us. I was surprised that Lehigh didn't have their own district, but
this time last year, I actually been interested, and I didn't mean to, but this time last year is when all that conversation started with that. Lehigh was invited by the West, and a lot of the cities up here we were advocating, going, hold it, if we would love to have Lehigh stay with us.
okay.
That's what I'm
Okay.
saying. It was a.
Well, I guess you got what you wanted then.
I think Lehigh
That's
did
good.
too. Lehigh kind of directed it too. So.
Okay. So there is, I listened to the hearings. I am not on the education committee. And one of the disadvantages of not being on the committee is that you don't get to hear all of the detailed discussion. So I listened to the hearings in the Senate and in the House. And I will say there is a lot of detail. So if you want to go listen specifically to the House education hearing, Julie King gives a lot of information there. And also I think Stephanie goes into more detail in that hearing than there is in the Senate hearing. So I would recommend that you listen to that if you have questions. I skipped one, HB 444, data privacy. This one it's a bill that builds on a data privacy bill that we passed last year. So Utah is kind of at the forefront of data privacy. Most states have not even thought about data privacy, and it's a huge, very important thing to be thinking about. So last year, we passed a really amazing, far-reaching bill to set up some guidelines. There were bills on the books for privacy that had not been followed for 30 years. And so there was a lot of research done into what was already in the books and how we could help agencies and government entities to start using what's already on the books and protecting people's privacy, getting rid of data that wasn't needed. There was just a lot of stuff that hadn't been considered. So HB 444 is another data privacy bill that was passed this year, and it builds on that one from last year. HB 307, okay, I wasn't sure. The mayor asked about the wildfire bill. So we were guessing that it was HB 307. Is that the one you're thinking of? Okay, so that one, it actually takes two funds. There's a fund that has been used for pre-fire stuff, like when you're clearing out underbrush and you're trying to prevent the fires from happening. And then there was a fund that was used for after a fire happened to mitigate the damage from the fires and to rebuild and to reseed and do all of the things to help heal from the fire. So those two funds were combined so that there could be a more holistic approach to firefighting. And that's basically what that bill was. But there's another fire one that I wanted to mention as long as I'm here, and that's the firefighter cancer amendments, which is a really great one. I don't know, were you up there on the day that we did the press conference? So this is a bill that modifies the Utah Occupational Disease Act, and it expands the rebuttal presumption for a firefighter diagnosed with cancer. So it provides for them to get treatment, pre-screening, because firefighters have a much higher incidence of cancer than the general public because they're in the smoke, breathing in the smoke. So this is a great protection and prevention measure for our firefighters. Okay, so the two bills that I actually got passed this year, I'll tell you really quickly about, and then we can go to questions. So I passed HB 402, and that's a bill to remove dyes and some specific chemicals from school-served food. The bill started out a lot broader than that, as usually happens in the legislature. I had included the vending machines and the pre and post school, all of the fundraising and all that. But gradually it got whittled down to just the kitchen, and that's a good start. So this bill does not include school districts that are under 5,500 students, and it does not include charter schools, but we really hope that they will voluntarily include themselves in this because this is a very important issue. It affects the ability of children to learn, and it ranges from ADHD to cancer, the things that are caused by these dyes and chemicals that are in our food. So I know that Granite District has been doing this for 3 years, and they've been very successful and have not noticed a huge price increase because of this, although the 3 years they've been doing it has been the 3 years where food prices have increased dramatically, so it would be hard to tell for sure. The other one is the SNAP bill, HB 403, and that requires a federal waiver, which we think will be granted given who is in charge at the moment. But that would allow us to remove soda from SNAP funding, and SNAP is food stamps, in case anybody doesn't know that. Currently, soda is the #1 purchase on SNAP dollars, which is really a frightening prospect. So that's what that bill does, and I'm really happy that I was able to pass those too. So I'm happy to be here. This is a great opportunity to interact with you guys, and I appreciate the invitation, and I would welcome questions if you have any.
Did I understand right that the legislature is now prohibiting cell phones in classrooms? I thought I read about that in the desert.
Yes, I believe that
I thought
bill
it was unanimously
passed.
passed in both.
It did
houses.
pass. So I actually voted against that bill, and I might have been the only person who did. I think I was the only person who
Yeah, because
did.
I said in the paper it was unanimous.
Oh, so I
Except
didn't
for-
even count. That's great. Great. At least I know where I stand. So the reason I voted against that bill, I see both sides of the argument. But I actually have a daughter who's a teacher, and she was opposed to the bill, which surprised me because I would have thought that teachers would have wanted to just get rid of them. They're a huge distraction. I know they are. And there are all kinds of dangers associated with them, health dangers and content dangers and all kinds of things. But the reason that I was opposed to it is that I feel like kids need to learn to be responsible. And also, in this day and age, parents are so used to being able to reach their kids. If there's ever an emergency or something, I think it's kind of, it causes panic when people can't communicate. Now, not to say in an emergency that you could communicate. It just depends on what kind of emergency it is, right? But my daughter actually said the same thing when I talked to her later. She said, when you take phones away from kids in high school, what's going to happen to them when they get to college? If they can't learn to manage their time and pay attention in class with a phone, then they're going to have trouble in college. And she teaches high school, so I don't know. But I did vote against it, no matter what the paper said.
I think that all of us up here, and probably folks sitting in the audience as well, know the difficulty that it can be to stand alone on something, especially when you're going on the record and casting a vote. So we want to thank you for making
I appreciate that.
educated
Thank you.
decision and standing with it, even if you're the only one voting against it.
Thanks. Much appreciated.
Any other questions? Or hey, I just want to tell you thank you. You know, I'll tell you how there are some mayors and council really try to engage on every single bill. If there's a billboard down going in Davis County to try to, and I think I kind of shared with you, and I shared with Brady Brammer and even Kurt Cullimore. I said, when we reach out, that was really the bills we were important about that we thought would affect. And so I think, you know, I did appreciate, you know, when you brought up about the 337, I remember your specific text saying this bill's a mess. And it was Kurt Cullimore that represents part of, you know, Highland, and I know that, you know,
And he's
yes,
my senator, and I love Kirk.
And
He,
so-
he does some really, really
he does,
great
and
things.
yes, it was up there. I was up there with the League of Cities on that specific bill, and it was interesting to see the city's been vote on how to do this. I think some of us were on. There were some cities that wanted to try to do a stall method in that bill. Others were saying, hey, let's try to work with some of the land use bills to show the legislators that we are not against every land use bill, that we can be a partner on it. That's what ended up happening with certain bills, is we said, hey, let's don't just try to stall everything. Let's try to show we're not part of the problem. We can be part of the solution.
And that's awesome.
I
That's
also-
the way to do it.
Chief Williams was not here tonight. I want you to tell praised you up and down on your communication with him. I know the bill that was the reader on the back of the
That's
license
nice.
plates, which Highland City has flock cameras. We were worried about how that might affect us. And he says that you were very attentive. You worked with him, and I really appreciate that. He speaks highly of you. And I think you saw when you did the open house, when things were kind of going, he came up, and there were some that were maybe kind of coming after you on some different things, that he was supportive and wanted to make sure, hey, you wanted to show you that you work with and will listen. So I appreciate that.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I appreciate that. It's been nice working with him. I'm sad that he's not going to be up there next year, but he's been great to work with. It's been a pleasure. They all have been, all of the law enforcement people were great.
You brought up one bill. The road fee, you heard as you walked in, that was one of the concerns. There's certain cities that have road fees and public safety
Yeah.
fees. Highland happens to be one of them. That's the SB 454. what was the concern? I mean, we saw that, and to be very open, Brady Brammer, who represents us as the senator, that was his bill coming out of the Senate. We had Karen Peterson that was in the House that
Right.
had two competing bills coming against each other there, kind of, and we saw. What was your feeling about the exemption for the charities? This bill was one that was coming down last year. To be very open, we kind of worked and we felt that bill was in place last year. And we were excited when Karen Peterson brought it about. We thought, okay, this will get a resolution and how to do fees in the city. And then we saw it got stalled again.
So I have mixed feelings on that. I think that there are some logical reasons for giving charitable organizations a pass on some things. We give them passes on taxes, for example. So I can see some justification for that. I actually would have voted against it if it were in there, though.
And let's just be
So-
there was a large church organization that was really pushing this. We kept hearing that this was, and I understand they have a lot of property. This could be a high expense for some
Right.
large charitable organizations. So I appreciate, like I said, that was when we were, the school district bill. To be real, that 454, I was refreshing all Friday night. That thing, I was going, I think it was circled. I think I even got a hold of printing on, okay, what are they doing? What are they doing? And we were wondering.
This was on Friday?
Yeah, it was Friday. Your last night
Until
before
midnight, you just
Yeah.
sat there pushing it?
Yeah, I wanted to see what. Well, I listened in, and so it was kind of interesting. And I
I've done that before, so I understand.
so just go, what are they doing?
Yeah.
We appreciate your involvement. Anything else?
Thanks.
I'd just like to make a comment. I really appreciate your service because this is your first year in the state legislature. And I appreciate your comments at the open house we had, a month ago, and different things. And it sounds like there's been lots of communication and you communicate with a lot of people. I think since you are kind of Highland City's representative, I mean, you represent a bigger area, but sometimes I think there was an interesting editorial in the newspaper in Deseret News about a week ago from Trent Skaggs, and he says, does the state legislature hate the cities? And I think he brought up some kind of valid points because a lot of times I think we kind of sit through the whole state legislature with bated breath because we don't know how what we're going to have to do because there's all these mandates that come out all the time that we have to deal with and a lot of land use things. And I'm just thinking it would be really nice as you go into the legislative session, because I'm sure you're going to be there for a while, is maybe in the late fall or winter when things are starting to come together, that maybe you came and talked to us and say, hey, these bills are coming, what do you think? Kind of get our opinions ahead of time, because we're the ones that have to implement a lot of what the state
Right.
passes in that 2.5 month period or 2 month period. And sometimes it's really a problem. We have to change all of our code and we have to, change all of our development plans and everything. And it's really a stressful thing when you're on city council at this level. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, it
Yeah,
totally
I'm
does.
just saying more
Yeah, and I
communication,
think
let
that
us
this
know.
year I'll
Yeah.
have a better opportunity to do that because I'll be involved with all the interim meetings.
Uh-huh.
I would be happy to meet with you. And before that, too, if there are things that come up that you see need to be addressed, I think talking sooner is always better than later because then we can address issues in a timely manner. So,
Well, and like you talked about the school district bill, we met in December before Christmas as
Right.
all the cities to talk about that bill. The sponsor had it out there. I think what the sponsor got frustrated with, why there was 4 reiterations, is they thought they had it negotiated, and then all of a sudden at the end things started getting chucked at
Sure.
them, and then also to be changed on the House
Yeah.
floor or the Senate floor. And I mean, I actually went in that one committee meeting that was all going on Friday. I actually zoomed in on that, and there was some very exciting language going on there, but it was interesting to see trying to get a resolution,
Right.
So
yeah, it's much nicer to negotiate the bills early in the process. I can tell you that.
thank you once again.
So,
Thank you.
Yeah,
We look
you're
forward to
welcome.
working
Thank
with
you for inviting me.
And I believe we have 2 students joining us in the very back who might be interested in your handout also.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. All right. Talk to you later.
Okay, we had down for a presentation from North Utah County Water Coordinator Ernie Johns, but I don't see Ernie here. Have we heard?
Yeah, I reached out to him. He got detained with the late doctor's appointment, and so that he would be happy to make this up to city council, and he apologized that he was unable to make it.
Okay. We'll then move on to item number C, This is about staff anniversaries and certificates. This will be Aaron.
Actually, Mayor, I'm going to let
that's right, Jess.
our
I'm
human
sorry, Jess.
resource
I
generalist.
knew you were coming, Jess. I'm sorry.
Thanks for having me tonight.
Maybe introduce yourself, Jess, just so everyone knows you.
I'm Jess Andre. I work in human resources and I do payroll for Highland City. With that, we had a staff meeting recently that we acknowledged a lot of really great things. We're going to talk about the anniversaries that we have, which are almost 20 in the last quarter, and some certifications that people have received and earned. Next. So Hunter Lovelace is one of our water workers, and he got his Water Cert 4, which is a week-long course and lots of studying and a pretty difficult test. So we're really excited for that. Braden Weiss got his CDL, which is a required license for a majority of our public works guys. And then I got I'm a certified professional through IPMA, which is, I don't know how to explain that, but it's basically an association that puts a whole bunch of study things together for different projects and puts a test in there. So it was a 12-module studying course and then a 3-hour-long test. Jeff Murdoch got 2 different trainings in incident command systems, which is basically for emergency management. And a majority of our public works guys got their flagger certification re-upped. So that was really great. Next slide, thank you. We have almost 20 anniversaries this last quarter. Okay. There's quite a few of them, so we won't list all of them, but we'll go to the 2 more slides down, and we're just going to really acknowledge the what we call milestones anniversaries, which are any 5, 10, 15, 20 year or more. Rob Patterson, he's our city attorney. He's been with us for 5 years, which we're really excited about. He also does planning and zoning for us. Kim Bergeson works in our library, and she's been here 10 years. And Ty Christensen has been here 20 years. He is now our street superintendent, but has had many positions before that.
Ty's the longest term employee we have, isn't he?
Currently, yes. Yes, it's amazing. 20 years, yeah. So that is my presentation for today. If anybody has any questions? No?
No, I think it's really nice, though, to kind of just hear and recognize to see what's going on with some of the employees. Like you said, as you see different anniversaries. I mean, like with Kim, I remember, like I said, she's been here 10 years, and the dedication she's had there for the library. I can't believe, Rob, it's been 5 years for you. That's some of the things. And you had down David Morton's for 1 year. For some reason, you've been here longer than 1 year. Is it really only been 1 year?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's been in the last quarter.
Yeah. Okay, we'll now move on to our action item. Well, actually, we have one consent item, number 3A, which is approval of meeting minutes. Doug, I know you handed out some corrections.
Yeah, I have 2 amendments, so I'd like to pull that from consent.
So are we doing electronic voting? Because I can't get mine to work.
No.
Okay.
I'd like to pull the item there for consent. Consent is to have a discussion. Since we don't have any others, we go ahead and just tell you, Doug, if you'll kind of
There are 2 items. First, Jenny Reese's name is misspelled in multiple places in the minutes.
Her last name is spelled R-E-E-S-E in the minutes, and it is R-E-E-S. So I propose changing all instances of Jenny Reese to Jenny Reese, R-E-E-S, and all instances of Miss Reese to Miss Reese. Second of all, in the second paragraph under item 6A, City Attorney Patterson is reported as saying the city could technically create its own ordinance separate from state law that requires driver's licenses. This is in regard to golf carts. And I think it's misleading, as it sounds like we could require a driver's license by ordinance. According to the video, what he actually said was technically under state law, I guess we could create our own driver's license or golf cart permitting process separate from state law. I therefore propose striking the text, the city could technically create its own ordinance separate from state law that requires driver's licenses, and replace it with the text, the city could technically create its own driver's license separate from state law and require that for golf carts.
With that, do we have a motion?
Can I have Doug explain that again? Because I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, the second item,
Yeah.
in the draft minutes, the text was the city could technically create its own ordinance separate from state law that requires driver's licenses, which sounds to me that we could create an ordinance that requires a state driver's license for using a golf cart. What he actually said, the intent was that we could create our own driver's license separate from state law and require that for golf carts. We cannot require a state driver's license for golf carts.
Right. Okay, that's your contention. Okay, fine.
Any other discussion on this item? Okay, if not, we open to a motion.
I move to adopt the February 18th draft minutes as amended.
I'll second it.
A motion by Doug, second by Scott. We'll start with Brittany down here.
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Kim?
Yes.
Ron?
Yes.
That passes 5-0. Now we'll move on to item number 4A, which is an action item. This is the Timpanogos Library Consortium interlocal agreement. We have Rob Patterson there, but also Donna is also here. I know that there's, maybe Rob, you can give us kind of a high overview view and a little bit where we're at in the stages of this.
Yes, I have a very short presentation. We've been working with Pleasant Grove and American Fork to create an interlocal agreement to create this consortium.
You might wait in the mic.
I'll get it closer to my mouth so Stephanie doesn't yell at me. To create this consortium where we'll, like you might see in Salt Lake, if you've ever been up there, you can share materials between different libraries, and you can return a book you checked out from Highland to American Fork, and it'll all get figured out of, getting it back to the right libraries. The hope is to go live fairly soon, but we thought we had we got close to a finished draft of the interlocal agreement, and there's been some additional language from some of the other cities they want to look at again and really nail down costs mostly, make sure it's really clear, just so we don't have any questions moving forward on how to handle that. So the interlocal agreement that we've proposed, and I think we'll stay this way, we're not going to change anything major, but it won't create a separate entity, so we're not creating like a Lone Peak. We're just creating a board of the library directors who will oversee how they share services and manage, making sure we get the right books back and forth and how that's all going to work out. And then the thing that we're really going to clarify is how we're going to share those costs between the cities. We kind of have it kind of general in the current language. We want to make it a little bit clearer so we don't have confusion of what is the right percentage for each city to share in. So we're going to make those tweaks and bring it back to the council once we get the kind of the final language there. So we thought we were at the finish line. We're not quite there yet. So we're asking to continue it until
So we need to continue,
another meeting.
but we're going to need to be, if you can ask some questions. It appeared, unless West we're hearing, they were hoping to go live, Donna, was April 7th? Now with that, we don't have our next city council meeting until April 15th. So we might need to hold a special council meeting by Zoom just on this one item to prove it, depending on what happens with the other cities. Is that and maybe I agree that they need to lock down how's the cost shared and things. But Donna, is there anything you want to share on this?
So I don't think there would be a huge issue if we start transporting books before this is agreed, as long as there's no money involved. But it would be nice to get it, approved before April 7th, if at all possible. If not, I think that won't be a deal breaker for us, but it would be nice.
These tweaks that are needed, are the other cities aware of them? Are they on board with
Yes,
the direction we want to go?
The attorneys have been talking, and
Yeah.
the attorneys talk, and we think we get there, then the attorneys talk some more, and we decide we should fix something else. So it's just doing another round. It's nothing, we don't think there's anything that's going to kill the deal. It's just, let's get the language really good.
Yeah, and
Great.
it sounds like it's just there to protect us in the future if something comes up so that we know what metric's going to be used.
That's really the goal. It's a little kind of vague in the current draft of it, so it's really locking that down, especially if we start adding other cities. If this becomes a success and we get, maybe the North Utah County becomes this consortium, let's really make it clear of how cost sharing will work between all the cities.
Good.
So let me just ask a question about it. So I think the advantages for Highland far outweigh any disadvantages. But I think what you're trying to clarify is how the costs exactly, because, if you look at things, American Fork has the biggest library with the biggest circulation. Pleasant Grove has a smaller library, but their population is actually greater than American Fork, or has been, although American Fork's. But both of those cities have twice the population we do. And library size, I don't know in comparison with Pleasant Grove, but we still have the smallest circulation, the smallest library. So I guess what you're worried about for Highland's sake is if we got strapped with a lot of increased costs. Is that the concern?
Correct. It may be that some services, it makes sense to do, say, thirds. But it may not make sense for other services because, as you said, Highland has a smaller population and smaller material, so maybe it should be based on usage or card holders or some other metric that's a little more proportional. So we're working through that discussion, make sure it's fair and equitable for all of the cities.
And this isn't just only being brought by Highland. It appears that other cities are also saying, hey, we need to get this put together. Does that make sense?
But I think because I'm kind of involved with the American Fork City Library quite a bit, and they seem really excited about this, and they're actually the ones that will be providing a lot of the materials. Isn't that your opinion too, Donna? Because they say nothing but good things about you, of course.
Yeah, American Fork is the biggest and the best funded library of the three, but it has been Cassandra Crane who has been the main motivator in the arranging this consortium. So she's very invested and excited for this to go forward. There's just a few little details that we just didn't get ironed out in time for today.
I think it's a great idea.
So with that, this is something we continue, correct?
Correct.
I'll make that motion.
Okay.
Are we ready for the motion, Mayor?
Is there other questions you guys need? I know it's very vague what's going on, but.
Well, this may be far-fetched. I'm sure you thought of it and probably discounted it and said, no, that really wouldn't work. But could we approve this with the idea that there'll be some tweaking that the attorneys will decide on, or do we really have to get into the weeds on this?
So we definitely thought of that as an option. We've done that with some other agreements before. The worry is, if I could say, this is how we're going to do it, we're going to do it based on usage. And that's how we're going to allocate costs. I would be fine recommending the council approve it, saying you let me figure out the language with that contention, but we don't know exactly what really the purpose, or not the purpose, but the kind of cost allocation method will be yet. So I don't want the council to approve it saying attorneys go figure it out, because you may not like how we propose the allocation. So I would rather bring it back to the council for final approval.
And I think we need to be cautious because we're the smallest library. And in many ways, we get more benefit in some ways, I think. So I think we have to be cautious. So I'm happy to make a motion unless there's more discussion. Okay, I move that the Highland City Council continue the Timpanogos Library Consortium Interlocal Cooperation Agreement. Hopefully, should I set a date? No. Okay, we'll leave it open.
I'll second.
I have a motion by Scott, second by Kim. We'll now start down here with you, Ron.
Yes.
Kim?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
And Brittany?
Yes.
Okay, that continuance is 5-0. We'll now move on to the next item, which is very similar to this one, which is the fee schedule that we'll have. And I think that's going to be Donna and David that's going to maybe kind of go over that.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So in conjunction with the prior item, the Timpanogos Consortium, there would be the need for some fee changes to our library fees. So on the next slide, Jay, this is our current fee structure for the library. The fees that would be changing would be the annual non-resident library fee. That would go up from that $70 to $90. And then there'd be two fees that we'd be removing, the late book return and the late would be kit or e-reader return. Those two fees would be removed from the fee schedule.
Now, since we discontinued, Rob, maybe you kind of help. We can approve the fee schedule subject to this agreement being done, correct? So this is something we can vote on.
Correct.
Okay.
Donna, if we were to approve this subject to the the interlocal agreement being approved, does that meet your needs? Or would you prefer that we simply adopt it?
Yeah, so when the new catalog goes live on April 7th, it will not be charging overdue fines. And so it depends on how concerned you are at changing the fee schedule before the fees actually change.
So I think the question Doug's asking, let's assume, and we want the agreement to go forward, but something happens to the agreement, it does not move forward. Are you in favor of still moving our fee schedule? That's it, and we're hopeful, we're anticipating the agreement goes forward, but if it doesn't, are you still agreeable to moving forward even without the consortium going in?
I would be in favor of it going forward regardless, because I don't know how long it's going to take them to sort out the ILA. But I can understand if you don't want to.
Or have it subject to the IRL?
I think the board certainly is in favor of these fees. I think we can represent that the board, the library board, has approved these fees as they're presented.
Yes,
are
the
they
library board
approving it
has
because we're going
approved
into the
these
consortium?
changes.
If we
They
adopt-
have, but the discussion, for example, on removing the late fees, I was the only one on the board that thought maybe we should look at not doing that. Because I grew up in an environment where that was important for me to learn responsibility.
Me too.
And
I'm still learning.
yeah,
I was waiting for this to go in effect,
Does she have
thinking
to
I wouldn't have
disclose
to
a
pay.
conflict?
Oh my!
Does she have to disclose a conflict of interest that this might wipe away late fees?
but having said that, I ended up
$22.
voting in favor of it because we had a discussion that was a
Yeah.
very good discussion. And I do agree, and I believe I represent the entire board in that we all agree with these fees the way they're presented here, irrespective of whether we meet with, do the consortium.
So can I ask some questions? It's been a while since I've been on the library board. And I tend to be a book buyer, unfortunately, and things. So let me ask a question. So when you eliminate the fines, what does that do to your circulation? Do you just, after a while, just charge them for the book? How do you do that?
That's a really good question, and there's a shift in the way that we handle that. So currently, if you check out a book, it's checked out for 3 weeks, and then after that 3 weeks, it starts accruing overdue fines. And then if you renew it, you still have like maybe 2 or 3 days of fines, and then you accrue it. Then you renew it, and then it has another 3 weeks, and then if it's not returned, then it can start accruing fines again, and that can happen. Currently, it can happen twice before it's marked as lost or missing. Under the new system, we would have an automatic renewal. So you would check out a book for 3 weeks. You would get a notice saying, your book is due, but we've automatically renewed it for you. Please return it as soon as you're done. And so then it renews 2 more times. And then after that final renewal, after that last 3-week period, in 2 weeks, you get a notice your book is lost. You've been charged for the replacement fee. The reason why when we switch to a fine-free system, we also adopt automatic renewal is because that limits the amount of time. So on that other way, you could have it checked out, accrue fees, have it checked out, accrue fees. It could be literally months before it's actually marked as missing. now there's a set amount of time that you can have a book before it's marked as missing as you're charged. And so you'll be getting your items either returned or paid for actually quicker.
So how do you collect the missing book fee? Does it come on people's utility bill, or they just get, you can't check any more books out unless you pay us? How do you do that?
Yes, it blocks their account. So it will block their account from both checking out books and accessing ebooks. And if Libby, right? That's going to be the main motivator, I think. But if the amount of fees accrue to a certain amount, we could have recourse to a collection agency.
So the amount of money you charge for that book, if it's, quote, lost, and many times it could be lost, you know, if you have young kids and that, how do you determine the price for that? Is it the price of the book on Amazon.com, or is it the price of book with one of the Ingram or one of these other? How do you determine the cost? Because book prices change all the time.
Right. The cost that is in the system is what we paid for it when we purchased it, so it's the purchase price. If a patron comes in and says, hey, you charged me this much, but I checked on Amazon and I could really get it for half the price now, we would be willing to reduce that.
So if they brought in a new book saying, hey, we bought this book, and it would have to be probably hardbound in many cases, and if they brought it in, that would be in lieu of paying the fee.
If they've pre-approved it for us, because sometimes, like if it's a book that was popular several years ago and we have several copies and they're not all checking out as much anymore, we might not choose to replace it. And so they would have to pre-approve that with us, but we have done that before.
So if you don't need another copy of the book, do they just pay you the money? Is that how it works? If they want to keep using the library?
What's that?
Well, if you've got several copies of the book, you don't need to rebuy a copy, but do they just pay the cost of what the book originally cost? So they can keep, but if not, you lose your library card.
Yes.
That makes sense? Okay.
A question is, so in this consortium, let's assume they don't return the book here to Highland. Does that freeze their account in Pleasant Grove and American Fork?
Yes. Now that we have
will our computer systems then be intertwined?
We're all the same computer system now. So if they have, too many fines in American Fork, they can't check out at Highland. This is an advantage because we have had patrons who were, maybe they have an American Fork card, but it's they're checking stuff out at our library. They'll run up their fees in American Fork so that they can't check things out over there. Then they'll come run up their fees at our library until they can't check out things here. And we've had patrons, that have hundreds of dollars of fines at both libraries. And so this is an advantage that now that we have a shared catalog, if their fines are too high at another library, they will also be blocked at our library.
So it's interesting. Many years ago, there was a place that used to be here in the United States called Blockbuster.
Yes.
And they actually...
I'm old enough to remember Blockbuster.
I know, we all... But being facetious on that, but Blockbuster always said that some of the profitability was their late fees. And I think all of us know that because it was a 2-day checkout or a 1-day checkout. You got to get... But it's just interesting to hear about the philosophy on the late fees. Now, they would charge... Blockbuster would do the same. If you didn't return, you paid for the video. But.
Yeah.
Anyway, any other questions you have on this for the fee schedule? I mean, this is kind of, so Donna, you're recommending going ahead and adjusting this fee based on no matter what happens in the future.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So with that, do we have any other further
to go into effect April 7th?
I was also going to say, if we fully anticipate this consortium will go through, if for some strange reason it doesn't, we can always readjust fees.
Change it
There'd
back.
be a lot of back-end work to fix the system again, but we can always go back later.
I'd like to make a motion.
I'd like to hear it.
You'll hear it. I move that City Council adopt the change to the library fees in the city fee schedule to eliminate overdue fines, especially for Kim Rodella, increase the non-resident fee to $90 a year to go into effect on April 7th, 2025.
I'll second it.
Second it with the exception of Kim Rodella.
Okay, so I have a motion by Kim.
Just kidding on that one. Just kidding.
We'll give it to Scott because I think Scott.
I seconded it, and I would second it with Kim's in there.
You want the motion with Kim Rodella in there?
No.
Okay. With that, then let's go ahead and we'll go down to vote. We're going to go back over here to Brittany.
Yes.
And then Scott.
Yes.
Doug.
Yes.
Kim and Ron.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, that now changes and passes 5-0. We'll now move on to our communication. These are non-voting items. We have a communication item as a library fund follow-up, which will come back to probably to Donna.
Since this is longer, I think I'll go stand over there.
Uh-oh, she's serious. She's
Serious.
Okay, is this on? Yeah. Okay. So last city council day, we had a special work session about the library fund. And I felt like we kind of ran out of time and weren't able to explore all of the aspects of that, of the library fund study. So I just wanted to do another presentation to kind of revisit that presentation. Okay, so the Library Foundation commissioned Fred Philpott of LRB to do a fund study on the library fund. And we wanted to assess the effect of inflation and increased demand on the library, on the financial viability of the library as in the coming years. We decided to do this study this year because the library is approaching the point where we cannot maintain our current levels of service without increasing funding. So the studies was started in December, and the model assumptions were that there would be a growth of revenue of about 2% annually, and that the expenses would also increase by about 2% annually. And he took into consideration that we do not currently have any debt. He also assumed that there would be 100 housing units added to Highland in 2025 and 2026 as part of the Ridgeview development, and then after that, 75 per year until 2030. So those were his assumptions. Since December, I've come to believe that that was a rather conservative estimate. Higher inflation is a real possibility because of different recent changes in national politics. And the higher inflation could necessitate raising wages more than 2% annually for our staff, and that is of a special import to the library because 70% of the library budget is spent on staff wages. And of course, inflation also affects the cost of books and other supplies.
So, Donna, just to make sure I'm understanding that second point, in the budget presentation we just had for the fiscal year 26 budget, we're budgeting a 3% annual increase for salaries. Is it the case that we budget a lower increase for the library?
In the study that was done, it was the 2% increase. Is that what it was?
Say it again?
In the study, because she's talking about the study that Fred Philpott did he put 2% wage increase? Is that correct?
He did. He did a 2% wage increase in his study.
And is that in line with what we ordinarily provide for library employees? Because it seems like it's not just this year, but that in past years, it has been a higher percentage than that for the city overall.
In the past few years, we have matched. The library employees have gotten what the other city employees have gotten, save an individual.
Yes. So that was probably an error when we were setting up the fund to put that 2%, because it almost for sure will be more than that if the city continues to increase staff wages by 3%. Okay, now since the, let's see, yeah, so the next screen. Since that meeting last 2 weeks ago, there's been some new information that has come forth. I went to a meeting of the Beehive Library Consortium, which is what provides Libby to the libraries. And at that meeting, there was a lot of information, but one piece of information I received is that 2/3 of the cost of Libby is provided by the state through federal grants, through the IMLS, which stands for the Institute for Museum and Library Services. Just on Monday, we got an email from the state library saying that the current federal administration has asked them to do deep cuts in their funding. So we don't know how that's going to affect the libraries, but it could possibly affect the amount of money that they can put into the Libby service. So there is a possibility within a year or so, if things don't change, that we could be asked to put more money into the consortium to keep it running at the current levels. If they did require us to pay, the full cost of circulating, that could impact the library's budget by as much as $30,000 a year. And for perspective, our current materials budget is $40,000 annually. So that could have a big impact. Or the other, there may be other things, maybe the state will decide to move in and make up those changes, or, I don't know how that's going to work out, but that's something that's just developed this week.
Can I just ask a little bit about your Libby? So our Libby, do we contract with the state to get the Libby service, or is it that we go to Libby and they get 2/3 of the funding from the state? Do you understand what I'm asking?
So
do we contract directly with Libby?
So there's a consortium, which is an organization or a group of libraries and the state library. So technically, we're all equal partners in this, except for the state library puts in the lion's share of the money, and that is entirely through federal grants. And so the meeting I went to on Friday was actually as library directors of libraries that participate in this, we are kind of voting members of the consortium. And so, does that answer your question? Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, the state libraries, like I said, has funded it, and actually the people who are in charge of the committee are state library employees, but all the libraries are participants in the consortium. That's why they call it a consortium. Okay, so there may be, the final sentence of this is that there might be increases that we hadn't anticipated 2 weeks ago. Okay, so in the fund study, we were looking at 3 different scenarios. One is that the library continues without increasing program or replacing aging books, or but it does anticipate that when I retire, you might need to pay more to attract a qualified candidate. In the second scenario, provides funding to replace 15% of the collection which are worn out or outdated, and adds an additional program team member to meet growing needs in our programs, and also converts one part-time position to a full-time position to help with replacing the aging books, because replacing books takes more than just money, it also takes staff time.
Donna, can I ask a question?
Yes.
So when you talk about replacing 15% of the collection, doesn't that include, does that just include books, but doesn't it include other items that we lend out as well?
Yes, it could. Like one of the things that's really showing wear and tear now are our preschool kits. We got them through a grant in 2019, and they're so popular. They're checked out all the time, and they're just ready to be replaced. So that kind of thing might need to be replaced as well.
Help
So-
me. Go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, but do you have a ballpark figure about how much it would cost to replace 15%? I know that's discussed somewhat in your study, but do you have
Yes.
like a
It's, I'm trying to remember his numbers.
and I'm talking about ballpark, just kind of an estimate.
Yeah, I was thinking it was about 80,000 a year for
80,000?
4 years.
Yeah, that seems like the
5
what was in the
years.
study. Okay.
Yes.
Let me ask you, we have the Friends of the
I
Library.
mean, I said that wrong. 80,000 total. It was about an additional like 12,000 a year for or something. I can't remember the numbers.
Okay, sorry.
Is it something, we've had the Friends of the Library in the past that's kind of helped us with certain fundraising. Is it something as we're looking at replacing the books? Do you feel like the Friends of the Library could maybe step in to kind of help it all there? Or?
Yes, except for they are already paying for a lot of our program incentives, like our summer reading incentives. A lot of the money they earn during the year are already going to support programming. There's not a lot more that they, of their fundraising that would come near to replacing this number of books.
Then my next question is, you're asking to go from a part-time to full-time. Naturally, when you go full-time, you have also adding another 40% on for benefits and all the other. Have you thought about just having 2 part-time individuals? I mean, I'm just saying, because there is some cost savings that way, but I don't know if how the staffing, what you envision.
That would be a possibility. But currently, the only one that selects items for the library is Kim. And she's been doing it for a long time, and she's just really good. I mean, we have, compared to other libraries in the state, we have a really high percent of our collection that circulates, and it's mostly because she is just really good at selecting. And it's a hard thing to train. She just is good at it because she's done it for 10 years. And so, yes, we could hire another person, but we would have a better outcome if we just gave Kim some more time.
Okay. Go ahead, Doug. Go ahead.
Back to the Friends question for just a moment. My recollection is that you get about $8,000 a year from the Friends. Is that?
They have earned between $6,000 and $8,000 in a year. Last year was a little lower than the year before.
Right. So if we're talking about the Friends making up $12,000 a year in book replacements, we're talking about them at doubling or tripling.
Yeah, they would
currently.
Yeah, the Friends would be hard put to make $12,000 a year.
Right. So the Friends organization has only been active for a few years. When I was on the library board, there wasn't an active Friends.
Yeah,
but you do have a library foundation. It's been years since I've been on that board. I have no idea how much money is in the foundation.
About 50,000. So that could make some of it if we used that money.
So are you using the foundation money mainly, well, you supported this study from it and 2 or 3 other studies and also some infrastructure, shelving and stuff. But some of that could be used for books.
It could. In my mind, the foundation money is towards not, I did not intend to spend foundation money on normal operational costs. That's for like research into capital improvement or, the purchasing of larger items. If we started using that for regular operating funds, it would be depleted really fast.
How did the money get into was it just people donating into the foundation? Is that how that money got there?
Yes, so that money comes directly from donations. I mean, also the money from the vending machine, but that's not very much. And it's primarily by a single donor. We have one single donor that's basically contributed all that money, and he's sitting in the room.
Okay, so with that, as we go through now, the friends.
I wonder who that could be. His initials are SS.
So we have a good donor that is name will not be said. So that has helped with that foundation. The friends, is that also just donors, or is that book sales? How's the
the most of the money that comes through the friends, like almost all of it, is through used book sales.
And how do you get your used books? Is that where people donate them?
People donate used books, and then we sell them constantly at the little shelf in our library, but then we also have the 2 major used book sales a year.
And then I brought up Blockbuster. I understand we're still purchasing DVDs, and maybe it's a small amount of the budget, but do you have any idea what the budget amount is on DVDs? And why are we keep continuing to do DVDs as Blockbuster is shut down because they can't operate it with them? So the question is, how much do we spend on DVDs, and why do you see the need to keep bringing DVDs in?
Okay, so we don't spend very much on DVDs. We only buy the most popular titles. We probably only spend $200 a year on DVDs. We keep collecting them because they circulate. People check them out. You would be surprised, but they circulate. They probably have a higher circulation rate than our adult fiction section. So people still like them.
So how about audiobooks?
The audiobooks, we do not purchase hardly any anymore.
So you do them all from
because of we just are maintaining the ones we've had before. And the people who check out audiobooks are primarily senior citizens who are just not very comfortable with technology.
What? Me?
Yeah, we don't. I think we bought one new book on CD last year. We hardly buy those anymore.
So coming back to what your study, going back with what the scenarios, you have 3 scenarios. What you're saying is, the increasing in the programming, aging of book. If we don't do anything, you're going to have a decrease in programming. You're going to have your books will start to get aged. We're going to have a struggle later on with the salary of a director, which we probably need to adjust before. We appreciate, Donna, that you've been very kind and thinking that way. The second is, hey, we're going to start replacing 15%. We'd like to move a full-time position, but your option number 2, is that anticipating there'd have to be a tax increase for the dedicated fee for the library?
Yes, I'll be getting to that in just a minute.
Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
In fact, anyway, the last scenario was that the library does everything in number 2, plus starts preparing and fundraising to add more space for programming as a library addition. So that's scenario 3. Okay, so we'll go to the next one. So scenario 1, which is just doing what we've been doing with no tax rate increase. So currently we have about, is it 65,000 in unallocated funds from previous year carryover. We would start, presumably this year, dipping into that each year just to meet our operating budget, our operating needs. And so that would last until about 2030, and it would pretty much be depleted. Okay, next one. And that's with 2% inflation. If we consider 3% inflation, which I don't think is over, I think that's very realistic, that the date where we drop into the non-viable range is earlier, just 2 years, basically. And then we'll just be out of money and we'll have to start cutting services. All right, next one. If we did a tax rate increase of 33%, which would bring the tax burden would increase by about $1.40 per month per resident, we would be able to maintain the library fund. And that means not dip into it. And we would have enough operating funds through 2030, and then it would start going down again.
So here's my question.
Yes.
You have 65,000 that's been saved from other years. Why do we need to have a fund balance of 65,000? I'm just saying, because it seems here you're trying to keep that 65,000. Why is that important to have that fund balance? Because it's come from prior years not being spent. Why you need to have a savings account like that?
That's a really good question. The answer is that, well, for one thing, it is kind of the city policy to maintain like up to 0.25% of the budget, of an annual budget for in case of emergencies. And this is less than 25% of the library's budget. So it's in line with the way that the city is prudent over their budgets. It's not at all unreasonable that there could be a need for an emergency expense of that much. For instance, if one of the water sprinklers in the ceiling went off in the middle of the night and destroyed 2 shelves of books, it would cost that much to replace them.
So, do we have insurance if something like that happens? Do we have property insurance? That was just a question. I assumed we'd have insurance to help if something like that happened.
I'd say this is kind of like a question of, well, and I mean, there's deductibles and things, but it's a question of, okay, so if there was an emergency or if there was some need, and this is a policy question, would the council expect the library to pay for it, or would it expect the city as a whole to be able to pick that up, right? And if it's the city as a whole, maybe you don't need as much of a fund balance, right, in the library.
And I think that,
True.
Okay, to me, why do you need it? Here's the reason for my question of the fund.
Why do we need it in the city?
Because there's needs and
It's
there's
the same
wants.
answer.
No, it's not, because there's needs and wants. We are to provide fire and police, garbage. The garbage will be out there. We could do roads and sewer and that. And I'm not trying to say the library's not needed, but we need to be understanding that is a want. If it's a need, we don't have other cities that have it. I'm not trying to be rude about it, but I'm going, there is a situation that you need to have a fund balance for sewer. You need a fund balance for your water, because that is when there's an emergency. If there's an emergency and we are shut down for 4 months without the library, there'll be some people not, but it doesn't stop the city from functioning.
But when we use the fund balance, we are using a one-time balance on an ongoing operation that over time catches up to you.
But my question is, why do they have to have savings? That's what I'm going, and you're going, well, you need savings in your house. I go, but that's why I'm saying, I understand, but why is the 65 and why is there savings?
And I think that's valid questions. Let me just kind of ask a little bit more. So I like the dedicated tax for the library. I think it's a safeguard. I mean, we've looked at this and discussed it over the years, and I've thought through it a lot. But your fund balance is from the dedicated tax plus your out-of-town resident fees, right? Because we're going to eliminate the fines. That was the other. What other sources of income do you have other than what the Friends?
So we have the dedicated tax and the non-resident fees. And then we have traditionally gotten grants in the past.
And your grants of what, $5,000 a year?
Between $5,000 and $10,000.
And
Over
they
COVID, it was much more. One of the reasons we have this huge fund balance is because during COVID, we received a lot of grants. And so we didn't use our regular fund that much. One year we got $30,000 in grants during COVID, and another year we got $25,000 in grants that were just basically handed to us. And so when I first became director, we didn't have a fund balance. And then it grew a lot of times, a lot because of COVID and some of the grant money that came through there. We can't expect that it would continue to grow. It just was kind of a windfall.
You know, in the public safety sector, they have sometimes where you hire a new employee that they can get funding for like 3 years, and then, you know, after 3 years, you've got to pick that up. Is there anything like that in the library, you know, where you could go and there might be a program where you say, hey, we're going to try, it helps you hire that employee? Because you're asking about maybe, you know, going to a full-time employee. Is there anything out there like that?
I'm sorry. You're hard to understand.
I'm
Could
sorry.
you say that again?
Okay, so with public safety, if we were trying to add a police or fireman, they have is it a SAFER grant, or what is it called?
It's a federal, it comes out of FEMA. It's a federal
and
staffing grant.
Is there anything of a grant, like if you're adding an employee, that they'll help cover that cost for a period of time? I recognize at the end we've got to pick it up. Are there grants that way at all?
I don't know of any.
Okay.
So let me ask, when we talked about this last council meeting and things, there was some research going to happen on if we charge the library for heating, cooling, lights, phone usage, printers, and all that stuff. Did we clarify that? Does that come out of your budget?
So we are charged a rate each year from the general fund to cover things like utilities and building maintenance.
And administrative costs. So the library will cover, like, part of Aaron's wage will come out, or
yes,
Jay's, you know,
and part
our
of your wages
part of our
come out
wages
of the
coming
library.
As administrative fee. I mean, so there, you know, Scott, what you bring up, that's something you have to say, okay, there's a feeling that they have a dedicated tax and they're supposed to function in that dedicated tax, and what the true cost to operate that should be out of the dedicated tax, versus as a council, do we want to look and say, okay, they're inside the city building and we're not going to have that be budgeted. But I think when we looked, Aaron, was it like 10,000? Or how much? I mean,
it's only about 8,000 or 9,000 a
I thought it
year.
was about 10,000.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't go a long way to solve our problems. So one thing about the way that Mr. Philpott did the study is that he did focus on this fund balance, which isn't the way I think about it. The way I think about it is, when do we cross the line where the tax income is not paying for the library expenses anymore? That's the important number to me. The fund balance just happened to be there. But what we really want is the library to be able to function within the amount of money that we receive, so that we don't have to cut services. That's
When you
the
go
real
back
thing.
to the site, so in Fred's study, this increase has 3%, but it also anticipated the new revenue coming in of the new building permits, correct? So it had the
Yes.
revenue sources in there.
Yes. Okay.
One comment about the discussion that we had about fund balance. I think that it is reasonable to ask if the library needs that large of a fund balance. If the library has a dedicated tax and we're expecting the library to fund itself, I don't think it is reasonable to ask if they should have a fund balance. That we could reasonably argue that it should be down in the $5,000 or $10,000 range. It's not my personal opinion, but I think that's a reasonable argument. But if we're saying that they shouldn't have a fund balance, that means that if anything unexpected comes up, the library's in a world of hurt.
I was just thinking of, what if in 1 year I retired and the security gates broke, and, maybe one other piece of equipment broke. That could add $20,000 or $30,000 of expenses
Now, what'd you
in
say,
1
the
year.
security what?
The security gates.
So people don't walk out.
Those are about $10,000. We got them with a grant, but I can't get a grant to replace them. And so when they break down, they need to be replaced if we care about it. And that would be $10,000 of unexpected cost. Or, there's, there could be things happen.
So what is it you're needing? Like, is there more information you want to provide? What is it you're needing from the council? Did you just want to share information, or what is it you're hoping?
Oh, today? Yeah, I just wanted to kind of explain the last presentation, but also to make a case for looking seriously at a tax rate increase. And what it would look like if we got one, and how much it would take to put the library on steady foundation financially. Okay, any more questions?
I think we should go to scenario 2 and look through that a little bit, Donna.
Okay, let's move to scenario 2. Okay, so in scenario 2, we would replace 7.5% of the books, mostly, and these are mostly children's books that are just worn out. We would also replace 7.5% of books because they're just yellowing or outdated. And that could be like nonfiction books that were more than 10 years old and really didn't have accurate information anymore. And then it would add an additional program team member because our programs are just, attendance have gotten really big. It's hard to do an effective story time when you have 75 people in the room. But we can't add an additional story time because we don't have enough staff time, that kind of idea.
Okay, sorry, I have a couple questions here.
Sure.
Question number 1, when we talk about replacing books, the percentage of books checked out versus digital books, is one increasing, one decreasing?
So the number of books...
I remember you talking about this, and I just want to know the numbers again.
Yes. So 6 years ago when I came, a lot of the adult fiction that was getting checked out were physical books. Now, the number of physical adult fiction checking out is, so each month we circulate about 9,000 digital ebooks or e-audiobooks and only about 4,000 adult physical books.
So we're increasing our expenditures for digital and decreasing for...
Yeah, we've already started doing that.
Okay.
We're spending a third of our materials budget on ebooks now that 6 years ago would have gone to physical books.
Gotcha. But the children's books still mostly...
Yeah, so 2/3 of our circulation is children's books.
And then for the programs that we offer, do you know the percentage of Highland residents versus non-residents?
So we only people who have Highland Library cards can attend our story times. We check cards every single week.
Okay.
So they're either Highland residents or people who have paid for a non-resident card. We are the only library in New Click that actually does that. And it's because our budget is so tight. American Fork doesn't check cards. Pleasant Grove doesn't check cards.
So non-residents can attend, but they have to have
they have to have paid for a non-resident card. And if they're from a New Click library, we usually let them stay for that one story time, but tell them that from that time forward they should go to their own library for story time. So we're the only of the libraries that does that, but we have to.
But we don't know the percentage of Highland residents versus non-residents.
At the story times and stuff? No, I've never tracked that.
On the story times, how often, of your programming, how often do you do that? Is it once a week? How many times will you do your programming?
How
often do you have like your story time?
We have 4 story times a week.
4?
4. Except for once a month, we also have a Spanish story time. So that time we have 5. We do one teen writers group a week. We do 2 school age programs a month, one a science, one a craft. And then we're doing 1 adult teen craft a month. And those are our regular monthly programs. And I have 1 special needs story time a month.
And then prior to you coming, how often were those going? I mean, I'm trying to understand how it's increased or things. What were we doing a lot of story times before you came?
So the first year I was here, we were doing 2 story times a week, and the attendance was between 10 and 20 people. So we were doing between 20 and 40 people attending story time a week. Now we're having between 150 and 200 people come to story time a week. So it really has increased. They've gotten really big. It's partially because we've learned how to do it well, and it's partially because the city has grown.
That's probably, are you seeing, you ask about Highland, are we starting to see a lot of younger families coming from the Ridgeview area? Are you noticing any certain area they're coming from?
The Ridgeview area has definitely had an impact. The Ridgeview area is why we started a Spanish story time, because there's a lot more Spanish speakers in that new Ridgeview area than there had been before. And we're getting like 30, 35 people to our Spanish story time. So in Highland, yeah, it's impact. Now, they're not all native Spanish speakers. Some of them are people who are trying to teach their children Spanish, but it's changed. The composition of the city has changed.
And with the budget increase it's requesting, and maybe in the scenarios, this is increasing the programming, correct?
In scenario 2, we replace books and then we add an additional staff to help with programs.
Honestly, as I look at scenario 2, I look at it more as you're maintaining rather than increasing, because of you're maintaining in terms of you're maintaining to keep up with the demand, right? You are increasing the number, right, like of things that you're doing, but it's to try to meet the demand, the increased demand that you're already there. So I look at it as mostly a maintenance, like keeping the level of service the same.
Yes. Okay, let's go to the next screen. It's going to gotta get through this. Don't want to keep you here all night.
I know, it's almost 9. Keep going.
Yes. Okay, in scenario 2, if we increase the tax rate by 40%, which would be about $1.75 per month per household, then we are basically bringing in more money than we're using up until about 2030. If you extend the chart beyond 2030, then it starts going back down. If we've already talked about this, but if we're okay with the library having as much fund balance as the city does, the amount of fund balance in 2030 would be about 35%, which is what the city has. But then it would start going back down, and by about, I'm trying to remember, I did extend it out, I think it was 2034, then we would have zero fund balance again. It would go down fairly quickly after that. Oh, let's see, did I write it? Yeah. One reason I like the 40% tax rate increase number is because that would be about $20 a year per household, which is how much we're raising the non-resident fee. So it would basically put the non-resident fee on an equal level with the Highland tax burden.
This again, is this on a home, $1 million home or something?
It's $1 million home.
Okay. Because it's going to differ.
It's going to differ.
Is it off the $1 million home? Is it off of 800 and whatever you were saying is the average?
Yeah, so that 800, I don't remember the exact number, but that was a number I just got.
I think it was 830.
Today, yeah, from the 2023 census. So it's.
But your number is based off
this
$1 million.
number is based on what Phil used.
Which is $1 million home, right?
1 million.
Yeah, that was just the number. It was hard. I mean, how'd you estimate? But that was the number that Fred came up with. All right, next screen.
I don't know if we need to spend time on scenario 3, if that's okay, Donna.
And actually, I had cut it out. So anyway, if inflation were 3%, it levels out a lot faster than if it's 2%. Okay, next screen. So in reality, scenario 1 is not maintaining current levels of service because it does not meet increased demands. Raising taxes a very small amount will enable the city to continue to offer library services to citizens that citizens have come to really appreciate. And then the 40% increase would make a Highland resident's contribution align with the new non-resident fee. Okay, next one. We had talked about a third scenario, but I've decided that that is a topic better consider it at a later time. So, and this is just a reminder that the current rate is one of the lowest rates in the state. Asking for a 40% increase does not make us an extravagant city. In fact, we're still, 2/3 the way down on the list of.
If we tripled the amount, tripled it, we would still be in the lower part of the state. We'd
Yeah.
go from second lowest to the fifth lowest.
Yeah. So it's not an extravagant ask. I know asking for a tax rate increase is always difficult, but it isn't really very extravagant.
So Donna,
Yes.
I think you make a compelling argument why we need to do this long term, and I'm a very good supporter of the library. But at the same time, what you haven't made a good compelling argument is why we need to do it this year or couldn't do it in another year or something. My concern is I think at some point we are, especially depending on what the state legislature does with our fees on a yearly basis, and this has been going on for 5 years, this constant discussion. I mean, if the state eliminates our fees, or the ability to have a road fee and a public safety fee, which may happen, then we're going to have an automatic property tax. And I actually emailed you about this. I'm sure you saw but my feeling is it would make sense to have the two property tax increases coupled with each other, or if we have to do that, because, in a couple years, we're going to have most of our bonds paid off, our building and park bonds. That frees up over $1 million a year in general fund money, as far as I understand. Is that right, David?
A lot of that currently, actually, the debt service is being paid by the impact fees that we collect and not general fund money.
Right.
So if you remember a couple years ago, we had over collected in parks impact fees. So we have everything sitting in there, and the large transfer we had to do last year to get under 35% in the general fund covers the building bond payment. So in the budget we presented to you tonight, no general fund money is being used to pay bonds.
Okay, but at the same time, when our bonds are paid off, it's got to free up some money.
Not in the general fund, it won't.
Well, somewhere.
So a question, maybe
Yeah.
this based off what Scott's asking, maybe we need to look in this. Maybe in the past, did we ever pull money out of the general fund to pay the bond payment? And does the general fund ever need to be reimbursed based off of some of those impact fees? Does that make? And that might be a long time back, but that's what we.
We'll have to discuss that because.
Yeah, we need to come. So, council, let's kind of with Donna's request, we can either wait and kind of go through some of our budget stuff if you want, or we need to say, hey, do we want to look at having the library stay as is, and what they're saying is the programs will have to decrease because the cost of the wages. Are you wanting to do looking at the dedicated tax and increasing that, or are you amenable to looking at having the library funded from some funds from the general fund? I mean, that's kind of, okay, do you want general fund? No, I want to do a tax increase with the dedicated tax, or no, let's have it function in the dedicated tax as is and not do a tax increase, understanding it might be effect on the programming. And is there another scenario we should be looking at, Ron, or anything?
No, but I'd like to say that I know that the board was concerned, was favorable of doing it now because we have this consortium that we have a nice increase in the library services that the residents are going to be aware of and be excited about. And looking at where we stand in the state percentage-wise, it's to me, it's unconscionable that we're down here. Highland is the highest household income in the state of Utah, and we're second lowest. Only Tremonton is lower than we are.
Under Santaquin and Gunnison.
Okay, so I've got a question. I'm just good. I'll be the devil's advocate here. Yeah. So where does Alpine Cedar Hill sit here? They don't have a dedicated tax. They don't have a library. They don't have any expense. And I'm not trying to. I'm just going. There's some cities that don't have any library expense, and so I'm not. I'm just going. It's hard where you're saying.
Do we want a library? I mean,
no. I think the residents support a library. Sometimes we come and try to use this, but I'm going that there's others that don't have the expense at all, and so they have zero that would be sitting.
Yeah.
To be fair, Alpine and Cedar do both have library expenses. It is admittedly far less than ours, but they do have some.
They will if they agree to.
Yeah,
so they have. But anyway, with that, council, I don't know if you're prepared to give some feedback on the direction. We're going to have to get it sometime in the budget process of what we want to do here. You know, because to do a tax increase, we can't usually get there in June and do that. We got to start getting out to the public, because then but we do, I think, is the truth and taxation we'd have to go through, and then that meeting would be in August. Is that right?
Yeah, there's typically a public hearing in August and then a final adoption, I believe, in September.
And I mean, if you're not, we weren't expecting you to give us direction tonight, but what we are hoping is, what information do you need to make this decision, right? Whether or not you want to do an increase, and what kind of scenario realm you support ultimately, and what information do you need to make those decisions, I think is what we need.
Well, I need kind of a holistic approach, because we've got public safety that wants another, is it $450,000? And we've got increased sewer fees, and we've got increased garbage fees, and we've got all these fees. I'd like to see the whole picture. I mean, and if we're not going to increase the public safety fee, we're going to raise property taxes to do the public safety, it seems like you would have one conjoined truth and taxation hearing if you raise property taxes. But, you know, raising property taxes in an election year, not my favorite thing.
I think,
I don't know if there is a good year to do it. I mean, we always get to say,
yes,
hey, there's a better year to- I don't know if there ever is.
I think this is a unique opportunity, because if we are able to successfully raise the tax rate for the library, that is additional income that's coming into the city. And the city benefits from that, right? You're not having to pull from the general fund to meet library shortfalls. And so, since we are adding extra services this year, it's an opportunity. I think it would not be a hard sell. I think we could do advertising and advocacy so that people would not refer this. I think they would accept it. And so it's an opportunity this year to benefit the city that might be harder in some of these other years when they're getting taxed or fee increases in other ways. I think it would, if we didn't try this year, it would be a missed opportunity.
What did the survey results say about library?
It was not great. As far as would you support a tax increase?
I have a slide for that if you want to go to the next slide. So go to the city survey one and click on the asterisks. So yeah, and then scroll down. So it just shows that the library has very favorable
ratings.
But go down to the last one. So yeah, no
one back.
Yes. So in that question in the survey, 10% said definitely not keep up with growth and inflation of library costs. 38% said definitely not. 30% said definitely yes. And 32 were kind of undecided. Probably not, but they hadn't received any information. These people had no idea that the library was facing insolvency. I think if we advertised to that 32%, they could be flipped over to supporting,
I think,
especially since it's such a small number.
It's hard. You use the word solvency. I don't think we become insolvent. It just means our programming changes and how we spend some money.
Yes. So instead of insolvency, then reduced services.
Right.
We're facing reduced services if, we don't receive extra funding. So I don't think the survey is a game changer. I think that 32% there could easily be swayed to supporting
So you're
a
thinking
tax
the
rate
32
increase.
will say yes. What about your 21 that might go no? I'm just saying, if you're saying the probability, that's where you have 53% that are undecided, and that or they're I would assume it's going to be really hard to change the 38. Usually, if they say a definite no, they're probably about any tax.
They're probably not going to change that. Definitely not. But
And
I
then-
think that probably one we could sway.
And I agree. I think you're definitely
Especially, if we're comparing this to the purchase of one candy bar a month. That's what it is. And I think most people would be willing to give up a candy bar to support the library.
And so, council, we just need to kind of give some indications, maybe not tonight, unless we need to just kind of say which scenario, are we okay with it functioning as it is, and we want to go another year or two, and then we have to look at it again. Are we wanting to do a dedicated tax, or are we wanting to fund from the city's general fund?
Yeah, and really, I mostly just want the library to be supported.
I agree.
And so if you decide to support it a different way than a tax rate increase, great. I just want it to continue to, because we've really created something very valuable and I think beautiful here in the city.
I agree. And that is, Donna, that's the hard thing. We want to support. You have really done a good job. And that's where it's hard. You're going, okay, you have really built it as it is kind of this, I will say we don't have a rec program and some things that way. So I'm going, I do think it does put a good face out there in the city. I don't know if this is the correct, when Scott brings up the year and going, okay, you got the federal government that just says cut, cut, cut. I don't know what we're going to end up doing with public safety. I do think it's hard to, if we have a public safety or something, I don't know how the public responds. I could see them being favorable. I got Dollar Tree that's now raising to $1.50. If you haven't heard, Dollar Tree's now going from $1.25 to $1.50. And I don't know what it does to people. People, if you say one candy bar, I don't know. The fire department's going to say it's one Big Mac meal. And so we're going to have a Big Mac meal, we're going to have a candy bar, and I'm going to go, I guess I don't know what I get. I got my SNAP funds I can't use for soda now, so I don't know what to do.
That's right.
So
anyway, I leave it in your capable hands. I
Yes.
trust you guys to make good decisions. So I just wanted to kind of lay out the numbers.
Can I make one last comment, though? I want you to know I really support the library, and I know you need more funding and different things. But I've gone through an attempt to raise property taxes in this city. And yes, the demographics have changed in the last 10 years. But I know what people that oppose property tax increases look for. And the first thing they'll focus in on is this $60,000 fund balance you have. And that's why I'm concerned about, with our budget showing $4.3 million going to be in the sewer fund, without explaining why we have that much fund balance when we're raising all the fees because of the TSSD. So it's just, people say, well, gee, you've got all these reserves, why do you need to charge us more? Because, we are in, even though this is a wealthy city as a whole, there are a lot of people that are not. There are a lot of people that are working to make ends meet all the time. And so I think we just have to be careful. That's where I worry about stuff like that. And not that it isn't justified, it's just, I share the mayor's concerns about having as big a fund balance there if we're asking for more money. So we might want to look at using some of that.
I am inclined, not convinced, but inclined to think that this is probably a good time to look at it. I am concerned, Donna's confidence notwithstanding, about a referendum. And if we go too far down the road of spending down that fund balance before we look to increase library revenues, I'm afraid that puts us out past the point where either the city is going to have to be subsidizing the library, or we're going to have to be cutting staff or programs. And once you do that, it's very, very difficult to build back up.
Yes,
to what we've got.
Yeah, we looked at a 3% inflation scenario, but what if?
I agree. It could be higher or things.
If it were 5%, then next year.
No, and I know your programs are only 10,000. I think
years.
your funding is now. But I thought, okay, what about if we call that a community service or community events and have that come out of the, because you're doing it, like we said, we don't have a rec program. You're doing that kind of community events. Now, I recognize you're moving. Some want to say the library should function on that dedicated tax. I get that. Does that make sense? And yet those will be the same ones if we try to increase it that I think might be a little harder. But I'm going, okay, if we are doing activities, we could say, okay, we're going to have the activities, our community events, help fund some of that. I know it doesn't, it kicks the can.
So you're saying pull it out of the general fund for community events.
We put it in community events, but then it goes to help for their program. Does that make sense? Now, I understand that that's not that dedicated fund I personally believe, and Scott helped me, and probably when we did this, they all wanted the library to function in that dedicated tax, is why they did the dedicated tax. Now, this does say, hey, we're putting here and we're trying to do activities a different way. It gets some funding, so it helps try bridge it a little bit. I don't know if long term it takes care of the issue. It bridges the gap.
Yeah.
So that's a possibility too.
But that's probably that scenario 3, having this, take the city's administration fees off, take off some of those, the cross charges for your software and some other things that way. You'll remove that, and then maybe we're going to look at it, some of your programming is actually more of a community enrichment or things that way, and try to help fund. We might be able to get a year or two, but we have the other issue, and Ron will bring it up. Don, we need to treat you fair. I appreciate you taking a wage hit, but I don't know if we're being fair with you. And so I think we've got to be careful that way too, that we have a director that's not getting adequately compensated. And I'm sensitive, I appreciate it, but I think it's something we've got to be careful asking you to do or to allow you to do.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different options, and so it's just time to look at them is the thing, so.
Yeah. But what you say, Mayor, is good, because we were talking today on events in the presentation of the budget to have less events but higher quality. And these events have been high quality as far as I can tell. And so, I would support using some of the...
Well, I'm just saying, it's just trying...
Yeah,
I know we're
Fairy Tale
getting
Bob
creative,
Saturday.
guys. It's just trying to help the library where you can... I mean, I look at your budget. To be right, I looked at... When we go through the budget thing and going, I know they have scrubbed this budget, and I'm going, maybe we got to go look at every department in the city like we're looking at the library trying to scrub. Because I do think you've scrubbed. I got to be honest, I think they scrubbed everything they can out of this thing.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Donna. Okay, we're now going to move on to our next item. And I believe, is this going to be the budget update, the quarterly financials?
Yeah, quarterly financial report. So this was on the agenda for the last meeting. We ran out of time, weren't able to get to it, so we brought it back. Nothing changed from the packet information that you received 2 weeks ago, but I do have some slides to show that just for the public or those watching online. So this is as of December 31st. So we're going back a few months here, but we do this quarterly. So as of December 31st, the fiscal year is 50% done. So that's the kind of the target number that we're looking for when you look at the percent of budget numbers that are either green or red. 50% would mean we're right on target. If it's green, it means we're at or above. If it's red, it means we're either under budget in revenues or over budget in expenditures. There's some notes that I've added to add some context to some of these numbers. A lot of times we have some seasonality or some upfront costs for things like insurance or transfers that we make between funds that happen early on in the year that can make expenditures look like they're higher than they normally would be for this time of the year. So I've added notes when that's the case. In the general fund, nothing really concerning. We're at 53% of our revenues and 55% of expenditures because of some of those front-loaded things. Open Space Fund, one of the questions that came in an email from Councilmember Courtney, why do we have a revenue in the Open Space Fund when we said that we are not going to use the Open Space Fund anymore? The answer to that is we allocate our interest revenues between the various funds based on a formula, a calculation that was created a while ago that needs to be updated. So there will be some corrections made. Some of the revenues that have been coded to that fund will be reclassified to the general fund. There is, though, still a small fund balance in the Open Space Fund that we need to get rid of, as well as some balance sheet accounts. There's a liability of some sort that we need to dig into and find out how we can clear that out. Once everything's cleared out, Rob Patterson, our attorney, he feels comfortable that we could close or dissolve the open space district with a resolution because of the nature of the district. And we wouldn't need to go through multiple years of no activity. We could just draft a resolution to close it out. But we want to make sure everything's out of there first.
Why do I think we've already done that?
2. Well, I think that you said it had to be dormant for 3 years, wasn't it?
Yeah. It was just whether it was classified as a local district or a special service district, and it was never quite clear what it was. And part of it is we ended the fee very clearly, but then we still had payments coming out of it for a while, and then it's just closing up all the liabilities associated with it. So we have to make sure everything's out of the fund so the district doesn't carry anything, and then we can end it.
And so we brought this up. We went, Kim and myself, and Jay went and knocked the doors with Provo River in Canterbury North to let those residents be aware that we need to reimburse them on some property we sold that we didn't own. And so with that, will that be coming out of the open space fund, or will we be using other funds?
So we have already transferred the bulk of the fund balance from the open space fund into the general fund. So any reimbursements that we may need to make for that would have to come out of the general
fund. Yep. How was your reception? They were nice.
Kim knew most of them. They all seemed to understand what was going on. As we're talking about the fund balance for open space, we went and talked to them last November, so kind of gave them a heads up what we were trying to do. We were just confirming. There were 2 residents there that I was notified the week before that Provo River had already filed a legal situation. They're about ready to be served. So I ran over that day to tell those residents, hey, this is what's going on. And then when we showed up to those residents, Provo River, they'd already been in communication with Provo River and seemed to kind of come to, they were okay signing that agreement. So, it would stop any litigation going on. And it sounded like Provo River had been in communication with most of the residents and was seeing a solution for it. So I think most of them were happy about it.
Yeah, I think the communication was just really done right. And so, by the time we were there, they were like, yep, we know exactly what's going on. Sounds great.
Okay, sorry, we kind of sidetracked.
No, you're good. I'm good. Moving on to the cemetery fund, the revenue amount as of December 31st.
Actually, one quick question back on the open space fund.
Yep.
Are we anticipating that we can get that zeroed out in this fiscal year so that we no longer have obligations out of it and we no longer have a balance?
Yeah, not fully understanding the nature of the liability that's there. It's relatively small. I don't think that there's going to be a concern with resolving it. I don't see a reason why we can't have it resolved before the end of this fiscal year.
Let's give it to library events.
They're in the open space library.
In the cemetery fund, you can see there the revenues are tracking a little bit low. As of December 31st, our lot sales revenue is only at 40%. Lot sales is kind of not fully descriptive of what goes into that account. It includes the lot sales, the burials, opening, closings, all of those things. We're actually going to try and change that a little bit in the next year's budget, but for this year's budget, that's what we're dealing with. We were at 40% in that account December 31st. We've had a few better months, so we're actually currently at like 68% when we're almost 75% through the year. So not too concerned there. There is some seasonality as well, so I still feel like we could reach and probably will reach the budget target. Next slide, Jay. Library fund that you've heard a lot about tonight. We're currently at 70% of our revenues. That's due to the fact that the bulk of the revenues is that dedicated tax that we received a big lump sum around January. Actually, this would be December. So we received a bulk sum in December, and then we get another one in January. But that's why that one's at 70%. Expenditures were at 47%, so looking great there. The Parks Tax Fund, we haven't used any of these funds yet, but the intent is to use these funds for playground replacement. We have received 55% of the Parks tax that we expected to receive, so we're on track there. Building and Development Fund, so if there's any fund where there's a little bit of concern, I guess it would maybe be this one. We were at 34% of our revenues. Mainly due to, you can see the notes there, building permits being at 32%, plan check fees at 27%, and inspection fees at 23%. So it kind of goes in line with what we talked about earlier in our budget work session with the slowdown of growth so far. The first half of the year, we've seen a much lower amount of building permits than we even thought we would see when we put the budget together. I don't know if that's going to pick up for the second half of the year. I don't know, Rob, if you have an idea of if things have started picking up. Not yet, doesn't sound like. So we'll keep an eye on that. But as was mentioned in our work session, with this fund, we kind of anticipate that due to the timing of developments and when permits are pulled and when CFOs are issued, we could see some ups and downs with this fund throughout the years.
The one thing, I did talk to M&G over there at the Highland Mains. They are under construction. They're anticipating turning the property over to some tenants for tenant improvements this fall. August, September. We might get lucky where they're done by January 1 and get that tax, and that's at 100%. Not the, and that might be. And I know you're going, hey, that might only equate to 10 or 15 homes, but it does equate to something.
Yeah, so we'll see how that pans out for the year. Next slide, Jay. Our debt service fund we use to make our bond payments for parks and building bonds. We've already made most of those payments. There's just some interest that wasn't included in the payments as of December. But all of the transfers that we make from the capital improvement funds have been made. So that's why that one shows 100% revenues. Parks capital, 85% of our revenues. A lot of that is transfers in from other funds. And then 112% of our expenditures. So that looks bad, but that doesn't take into account that we did a budget adjustment in January for this fund to increase that budget number. So since this report is looking as of December 31st, can't really show that the budget was at that level yet. So that number is much better now. Capital roads improvement, we've transferred all the money that we had planned on into that fund. We've only spent about 12%. As the weather warms up, I'm sure Chris will get busy with working on those projects for road improvement. Building capital, kind of the same thing. We've transferred the money that we had budgeted to transfer, spent 32% of it. The majority of this budget is for the parks maintenance building. Town Center Exaction Fund, this one, we have just a small amounts of interest still going into this fund. I don't have much more to say about it. There's still a few, I think 1 or 2 areas that are still paying this fee, so we can't do away with the fund. It just kind of sits there. And then moving into our utility funds, sewer fund revenues at 47%. Mainly what's bringing that down a little bit is the impact fee component of the revenues being lower than we had budgeted. Operationally, the service fees that we, especially with the new increase that we had adopted, are looking like we're on target. Moving to the next slide. Pressurized irrigation, kind of the same thing. There's a few different components into the revenue here. There's the impact fees, water meters, and grant revenues that are low that are bringing that down, but the service charges are looking okay. Storm sewer, no concerns there. Culinary water, a similar story to PI, where there's impact fees, meter fees, and grant revenues that we haven't seen that are bringing that percentage down. And then last slide is our transportation fund. Revenues are looking great. We're a little bit above schedule on expenditures due to our road fee projects. There must have been some fall projects before it got cold that got done there. And then our internal service IT fund, this is the fund that pays for computer equipment. It says 97%, but since this report was generated, there's a correcting entry that I made for something that happened where some computer equipment that we purchased in the last fiscal year didn't get paid for until this fiscal year, but then in our audit, it got moved back into the last fiscal year. So that number, instead of $47,200, it's really like $29,000 that we've spent so far this year. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
On this, cutting through all the detail, it appears that everything's going to fall within the fiscal year budget. Is that?
More or less, yeah, with the exception of some of the building and development revenues that we may not reach those budget levels.
Another way to do this would be to give us the year-to-date, give us what the budget is, but give us what the forecast is. Okay, at the rate we're doing it, we're forecasting, and it may not always be to the budget. It may be less in some and more in others. It just seems like it would give us more information, because I look at it and basically you're saying, yeah, we're okay and we got a lot of detail, but that's all we have. I don't have a real sense for, is there anything in trouble that maybe your own best forecasting that you can do at this point, halfway through the year, we may be in trouble here, we may not be in trouble there, just to give us a little more detail.
Okay.
Anything else? David, thank you. I appreciate the overview. I think, Ron, you're because I had love and go, okay, where does it look like we're off? Does it make sense you're showing this? But I think you were sharing that in your voice. Yeah. But
words, but it would just be nice to have the detail, and almost it's like a commitment you're making. As the finance director, I'm saying we're going to be I'm forecasting this, rather than, it leaves it a little loose right now for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I get what you're saying, especially with some of those revenue items where there's grant revenue included in there that we're fairly confident we're going to get.
Correct.
We could project that we're going to still receive that and show you what that percentage would be. So I get that.
And am I correct in understanding that some of those where we're showing low because of impact fees or building permits or something, we don't actually have a reasonable expectation that we're going to come up to 100% of budget? But those funds tend to be ones where we carry a balance knowing that we're going to use more or less of that balance in any given year. So it isn't as if we're expecting them to balance out year over year, so we have to watch really carefully on expenses.
Yeah, I mean, we like we've said in the past, we don't typically like to use fund balance for ongoing expenses in most cases. In some cases, like the Building and Development Fund, it makes a little bit more sense because that fund doesn't have any capital projects to use fund balance for. So really, the fund balance there is for those up and down years where we still want to keep those people on staff, but we're not seeing the amount of building permits or impact fees coming in. So we can utilize some of that fund balance in the down years and make up for it in the up years.
I'm not arguing against watching that more carefully, just that there are some cases where we don't expect it to. We have no reasonable expectation of it coming up to 100%, but we're okay.
Well, your building fees or your building permits, we have anticipated they're going to slow down because we have had more come in than what we were spending, and so we anticipate that will be the process for a while.
But hopefully that would be in the budget, that we anticipated it went down, so we budgeted accordingly. So I still would like to see the forecast.
Huh? That could be.
To me, it's a commitment that you're making as a department that has input from all the other departments that say, hey, we're okay here or we're not okay. That's kind of
what I think
the
what you're saying
detail
is
I'd
give
like.
us our warning signs where our budgets aren't coming in. It kind of gives us, hey, you need to be aware if in the cemetery, we anticipated we're on this plots, we're here, and so we're going to be a shortfall in our budget to be able to fund it.
Right.
I think that's what you're asking.
But we're here to support you
Yeah.
when that time comes. I mean, we're short on something, we will support you in that.
Yeah, and
because we're aware of it and we have the information that we then can share to the residents.
Yeah, and I've tried to make that clear in the notes, but I see what you're saying, and I can make it more clear with hard numbers where there's a projection instead of just notes saying this is why this is a little bit low right now. So,
anything else for David?
Good feedback.
Okay, let's move on to our next
Thank
item.
you.
Yeah, thank you, David. Let's go on to 6C, which is East-West Collector Road data follow-up. I think you're going to tell us a little bit where we've been getting data and what's going on.
Correct. So we got the data collected for that east end of Canal Boulevard in between Alpine Highway and North County Boulevard. And you can see that we put our data collectors out in two locations, on the west, towards the west end, a little bit more up towards the east end. I think it's probably not surprising that, especially on the west end where we've got that dip and we don't really have houses fronting, you can see our 85th percentile speeds were in the 40 to 43 miles per hour range. Average speeds were 39, 36 miles per hour. And the percentage of drivers that we had that were going 40 miles an hour or more than that were almost 50%. Almost half of the drivers were going more than 10 over. I think Councilmember Smith might have been the only vehicle going the speed limit in that section.
Now, is this when you've had the flashing sign too? Because I thought
that
people
is
slowed
when we
down.
had the flashing sign.
With the flashing sign.
With the flash. So it's a good thing we had that.
Yeah.
You can see towards the
Because I've
east-
seen people slow up to that.
I agree.
Yeah.
It did seem like it had some
That's interesting.
benefits to it. So
Let me just make a quick comment, because I live here, and there's a big difference when people kind of drive the speed limit and when they're driving 40 or 50 miles an hour, the noise. In fact, there's a lot of times I just kind of wish I'd never went with the east-west corridor because it's getting so noisy. Okay, go ahead, sorry.
you can see if you look at the eastern end, those numbers have all come down quite a bit. The 85th percentile is 37 to 39. Average speeds are 35, and the percentage of 40 miles an hour or over are closer to 10% on the one, actually 4% on the other. But you've got the businesses there, you've got the homes there, you've got the townhomes. I think the feeling is it constricts it, which again is one of the safety measures that we talk about. Constricted feel, it just you start to slow down. So I wanted to compare this to the other sections of Canal Boulevard. So
Okay, let me ask you, do we have any traffic count data when we're getting all this?
they didn't give me the traffic counts with it. They just gave me the speed data. I wanted to include the counts.
I would love to know the count there on that section.
I'll look for
Yeah.
that and see if I can.
think
I
it's
didn't
close to
get the memo. It might have been he had summarized all this information in the email that he sent. Told me he had the memo, but he may just not have attached.
So who's
it,
he?
so-
Who's doing the data?
WCG, Ian. So yeah, if we look at the next slide. There we go. So Canal Boulevard West, which is 6,800 west to 6,000 west. Then we have the Canal Boulevard midsection, which is 6,000 west to Alpine Highway. And then the east is Alpine Highway to North County Boulevard. You can see that pretty much the speeds all go up the farther east we go with each of those sections. They're all signed for 30 miles per hour, but the average speed starts out at 30 and a half, then it goes up to 34, and then up to 36 by the time we get to the east end. 85th percentile again, 35 and a half to 38 to 39, almost 40. And then the percentage that are 10 miles an hour over, 3.6 up to 8.3, and then up to 20 as we move further east, which again, I think some of the feel of that changes as we go and we get closer to the high school, we get closer to the commercial areas of the city, and that's some explanation.
The Canal Boulevard West, that includes Madison?
I'm sorry?
That
includes Madison.
That is
That's it.
Madison.
That is.
Basically.
That's-
Which previously had a speed limit of 25. We changed it to 30 when we finished off the rest of it. So, interesting.
Yeah.
Any questions on this?
We did reset that, and I think the gentleman that spoke earlier had mentioned that we do have the driver feedback sign on 9600 North now. Apparently it's not turned on, and I'm sure we were out plowing today, and hopefully we'll get that taken care of today or tomorrow. And we are actively collecting the data on the other streets.
Good. Because I think you're doing all the east to west streets in this.
Correct. We went up to 118, and then we'll go to 112, and then we'll come back with that information.
So can you come back with the count?
I can do that. Yeah.
I'm just
I'll follow up
curious
with that.
how many. 'Cause
I think it'd be
it's
good on all
several
sections.
thousand.
I agree.
It'd be good to see how many cars we have on the east, then what do we have in the mid, and then what do we have in the west.
I had another row that had that information on it, but when I didn't find it, I just deleted that. So I'll bring that back for you.
Okay.
And then I think it'd be helpful to understand on 9600 North, or on how much traffic we have there, to look what Canal's carrying and what 96 is carrying. You know what I mean? And then what 10400 is carrying. And even 118th. I mean, it'd be interesting to look what we're seeing carrying on the different loads on the street. So.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to now move on to the next item, which is the community development updates.
Not much to update. We're going to have a DAB, our administration board meeting next week for Plat M of Ridgeview, which is again more of the estate lots on the west side. And then just as a reminder, general plan workshop, April 8th. You want to talk about?
That's transportation.
It's transportation. So we're going to get some information to you later this week or beginning of next week about some summary of what it is, what we'll be looking at, and some interesting areas to go look at.
And then we have Planning Commission next week. I think you have the agenda. We had asked them to look at the PO zone for Patterson.
The PO zone will be back to the Planning Commission, then we'll bring it back to the council in April.
I don't think there's anything else other than they had some training for open meetings.
For the general plan meeting, we will not be actively organizing any field trips to hotspots for transportation, but planning commissioners and city council members are free to organize and do so, but we're not organizing anything formal there, so don't expect that.
I could just say we're going to go if you want to go. Okay, next one is going to be the school district update. I think we're all familiar with what happened with the bill. The bill passed. It appears that the West, one of the big things that came out of the bill, if they desire to go get a bond, they can do the bond, but then they have to pay for that bond. And Brittany, you can kind of help chime in. I have a meeting tomorrow of the interlocal for the school district here in the Central. In that meeting, they've been doing a survey for a temporary name. Brittany, I don't know if you had your temporary names up. I was going to text you on that. But while you're doing that, I'll kind of tell you what they're also looking at is we are going to considering, it's only going to be a discussion only, an agreement with KCT as an agreement that if there's things that come up financially or studying of assets, that we'd have someone that could step in to kind of help on that. It is a discussion item only. So we'll just kind of see that. Now, with that, there were several names that were presented. Brittany, do you have those names?
Some rather interesting ones, too.
I don't know if you got the email, if everyone on the names. What are some of the top names or fun names?
I do. The top names, let's see. Starting at the highest. Lone Peak, Timpanogos, Mountain Point, Alpine School District, spelled a variety of ways. Mountain Point, North Valley, Alpine Peaks, Rocky Mountain, Silicon Slopes, Dry Creek. Those were the...
Well, let's start back up because tomorrow they're going to be asking for some feedback. Let's go, just everyone kind of say, you can give thumbs up or just tomorrow they're going to ask kind of for a vote.
I thought the South District had already picked Timpanogos.
They have. So Timpanogos is taken and Lake Mountain, I think Lake Mountain.
Lake Mountain, but I didn't finish with my list.
I was
sorry.
finished
Keep
the
going.
list. These are
Keep
good.
going.
Okay.
These get good.
Yeah. So we also have the
This is
discounted.
voted. People submitted the names. You can vote
Yes.
on them.
Well, this is the list that they will consider. The board will.
Okay.
The Discounted Education Emporium, the Hunger Games District, the Hunger Games,
Oh, 100.
the Snob Hill School District, the We Hate Special Needs Students Who Don't Live in Our Town School District, let's see, Celestial School District, Privilege Peaks, Hold My Soda, and the Elitist. Those were also.
So go back up to the top. Let's go even the top 10. What's the top 10 that are going to be able to be chosen? Anything that might have Timpanogos in it cannot. If it's just Alpine's name, you can. We did hear you can hear if it has the name Alpine. This can't be called Alpine, but you could add something else onto it.
And they had generally said they wanted to avoid the name of a specific city or school.
Cool. That was
is
the one thing that.
So then the highest ones would be Mountain Point.
Mountain Point? Some up, down, even?
North Valley. Alpine Peaks. Oh, I like Alpine
I like Alpine Peaks.
Rocky Mountain. No, Silicon Slopes. I hope you guys all have your own ideas because you don't like any of these. Mountain Peaks. Dry Creek. Dry Creek, Alpine, spelled Alpyne, Alpine. No, okay.
But wait, I thought we were avoiding city names.
Okay, so let's go through some of the names I see. You had Alpine Peaks.
I don't think Alpine Peaks is using the name of the city Because what alpine means, it's mountainous. It's not just alpine.
And then the other top is Dry Creek seemed to be kind of up there.
Dry Creek, Mountain Point, North Valley. A lot of people like the idea of using Alpine somewhere in there as kind of heritage.
Yeah.
I like the elitist.
I think, honestly, it'd be kind of weird to be in a school district named Dry Creek. I don't know. How would you?
I mean, you got to
What
think
school
of
district would
you
in?
got to
Dry
think of a
Creek.
teenager. How can they construe that? But I also
What about
Alpine
Mountain
Peaks.
Point? You guys like Mountain Point?
Mountain Point and Silicon Slopes. Anybody?
Yeah, I get tired of
No.
Silicon
Yeah.
Slopes.
Are we kind of
Mountain Point's not bad.
What is it? Is it between Mountain Point and Alpine Peak?
Yeah.
I'd say I like either one of those.
Okay, because that will be a question that will come. Okay, that's the report. Anything else? Anyone else want to say on the school district?
No.
Okay. With that, then we can conclude our meeting. We do have a closed session that we need to go into. That will be about. It will be personnel, Aaron, and litigation, and potential.
And
amendment.
Stephanie's got a motion for you on that.
Oh.
Oh, just kidding. Yes.
Okay, and you said you're not going to. Oh, you're fine.
Just.
Can we increase that?
I'll make the motion.
Yeah, that'll work.
I move that the Highland City Council recess the regular city council meeting to convene in a closed meeting in the executive conference room to discuss the character, professional competence, or physical or mental health of an individual and pending or reasonably imminent litigation.
I have a motion by Scott.
Second.
Second by Doug.
I can read.
Now we need a roll call on this, right? So we'll start down here with you, Ron.
Yes.
Kim.
Aye.
Doug.
Yes.
Okay, Scott.
Yes.
And Brittany.
Yes.
We are now convening into closed session.